Chaya Raichik of Libs of TikTok is the queen of defamation who routinely doxes and slanders LGBTQ plus people and their allies, all for views, clicks, and clout on the internet. But now she's mad, and ironically, she's threatening other people with defamation lawsuits because they're daring to point out that her rhetoric sometimes leads to violence against LGBTQ plus people. They're daring to point out that what she's doing is fostering a climate of hate and bigotry towards queer people that sometimes manifests in violence, and as a result, she's trying to silence them by threatening them with defamation lawsuits. Now, said violence materializes in a variety of ways. For example, when she falsely accuses pediatric hospitals of doing sex change surgeries on minors, or claims that schools are grooming kids by distributing LGBTQ plus books to them. Well, her followers sometimes get so worked up that they end up harassing or even making bomb threats to whoever's in her crosshairs, 21 and counting so far, according to a report by NBC News. But now people are pointing the finger at Chaya Raichik once again because the anti-LGBTQ plus environment that she helped to cultivate at a particular school in Oklahoma led to bullying and ultimately ended in the death of a non-binary teenager named Benedict after they were beaten by 3 girls in a school bathroom. But before it got to that point, they were bullied relentlessly, and The Independent reports the bullying had started in earnest at the beginning of the 2023 school year, a few months after Oklahoma's Governor Kevin Stitt signed a bill that required public school students to use bathrooms that matched the sex listed on their birth certificates. A few weeks ago, on the 7th of February, the bullying allegedly erupted in violence when Nex suffered severe head injuries during a physical altercation at Owasso High School, according to the Owasso Police Department. Now, during the physical altercation, Nex was badly beaten and bruised, and at one point they hit their head on the ground when they were knocked over, and the school called their mom but didn't call an ambulance, which is mind-boggling to me. And their mom ended up taking them to the hospital later on for treatment. They were subsequently dismissed in the evening, and the next day, well, they weren't actually better. They collapsed, and by the time EMTs arrived, they had already stopped breathing and died shortly after. A 16-year-old child died. They lost their life in a likely hate crime that occurred at a place where they were supposed to be safe, at school. But in Oklahoma, the bathroom usage of trans children is policed thanks to a law signed by Oklahoma's Republican governor, which can and often does lead to bullying when students suddenly are using different bathrooms than the ones that they were using. And furthermore, here's where Chaya Raichik comes into play. The Independent continues, an Owasso High School teacher who Nex had greatly admired resigned in 2022 after they were featured in one of Miss Raichik's posts. Quote, Nex was very angry about it, Miss Benedict said. Miss Benedict said that teachers who encourage debate about gender issues were not promoting sexualized content. Quote, they're allowing the students to be who they are. Now, what exactly did that teacher do that was so bad, you ask? Well, in a now deleted tweet, Libs of TikTok shared a video of him telling LGBTQ plus youth, quote, if your parents don't accept you for who you are, fuck them. I'm your parents now. In a small town, that led to controversy, and that teacher resigned. Let me just say this. The fact that that teacher resigned is absurd because that is what adults should be doing. Affirming the identities of LGBTQ plus youth can be life-saving. Queer youth, especially trans youth, are disproportionately at risk for suicidal ideation, so to have someone there to accept them and affirm their identity is really important. But queer students lost an ally at that school who dared to defend them. Nex lost someone who they cared about, who cared about them, who could be there for them as a mentor. Now, I haven't seen anyone blame Chaya Raichik directly for Nex's death, but people have said that adults politicizing trans issues and policing every aspect of their existence is going to have a ripple effect, right? When politicians and parents demonize trans people, their kids hear that and adopt the same hatred towards their peers who happen to be trans or non-binary, which then results in bullying. And after Chaya Raichik harassed Nex's teacher into resigning, Oklahoma School Superintendent Ryan Walter appointed her to the Oklahoma Department of Education's Library Media Advisory Committee, meaning that this person who doesn't even live in that state with no children is going to be able to police content for students in Oklahoma schools. And here he is with the picture of her tweeting on February 6th, making schools safe, i.e. purging schools of LGBTQ plus affirming material and adults. A day after that photo was taken, we learned how safe the schools are being made in Oklahoma, especially if you're a non-binary student. So when a stochastic terrorist who made a name for herself on the internet by smearing and doxing innocent queer people and their allies is appointed to a position of power over students in Oklahoma schools, it's not unreasonable to ask whether or not the adults here share some culpability. Not just Chaya Raichik, but everyone here, the politicians, the people at the school. I mean, this was a failure. They failed Nex. Maybe Nex was bullied by students that were taught trans people aren't people, because that's what they hear all the fucking time. I mean, if the school didn't even have the courtesy to call an ambulance, I have to assume that this speaks to their general lack of regard for trans students overall. In fact, one TikToker, I think, put it best.
Far-right Republican rhetoric contributed to the beating death of a 16-year-old student in Oklahoma. Just a few weeks ago, Ryan Waters, the superintendent of schools in Oklahoma, added the creator of Libs of TikTok to the school library board. And it was too much even for the people of Oklahoma. There was no benefit to putting a woman from California who has no children in the Oklahoma school system on the school board when the entire ethos of her social media account is to attack, dehumanize, criticize, and dox queer people. And that hateful rhetoric and dehumanizing of queer people, coupled with the broad attacks on trans children, resulted in the death of a child.
That's exactly right. This outcome was inevitable, given how hyperbolic and vitriolic and outrageous the rhetoric about trans people has become in this country. Not just in Oklahoma, all around the country. But that mild criticism there from that one TikTok creator was, I guess, too much for Chaya Raichik, because she is now threatening to sue her for saying what I think everyone sees as obvious. She writes, "Here's an account with 3 million followers just casually blaming a teen's death on me. She says I contributed to the death and my rhetoric resulted in the death. Defamation doesn't even begin to cover what this is. This is a straight up libel. I will not tolerate this." And then the emojis indicates that she's planning to sue. Now, it's incredible that Chaya Raichik, of all people, would cry about defamation for the fact that that is her favorite thing in the world to do. She defames people all the time. She defamed Nex's teacher and accused him of grooming, all because he said he would accept queer students rejected by their parents. So she loves defamation, but all of a sudden, she thinks defamation is bad. But here's the thing. This isn't defamation. She's not being defamed here. But the goal here in threatening to sue people who are criticizing her is to intimidate them into silence, bully them into shutting up. And that's not me saying this, even though that's generally what cowards tend to do. She basically admitted that this was the goal. She knows that she doesn't have a case, but she just wants them to stop criticizing her.
I'm discussing it with the legal team. Like, it's not off the table. And I mean, it's also like there's another aspect of, like, you know, even if you can't win the defamation case, or like there's a very likely chance you won't win, like sometimes it still might be worth it to take action just so that they stop this behavior.
And that, my friends, is what we call a SLAPP suit. And thankfully, many states now have protections against these kinds of lawsuits, so people who frivolously sue critics don't only get their cases dismissed, but they're also on the hook for legal fees as well if it's determined that the lawsuit they brought forward was indeed a SLAPP suit. This would be the case with these threats that she's doing right now. So it's a dangerous game to play, honestly, if you're Chaya Raichik, especially for the fact that queer people she defamed could actually have legitimate defamation cases against her. So you would think that she'd want to save her money for those cases in the event, you know, one of the people she defamed chooses to sue her. But I mean, if you want to pay the legal fees of people who you're planning to sue, go ahead, do it, because you're going to be the one who loses. But I mean, this is what she tends to do. She weaponizes her large platform against innocent people and directs hate and incites harassment against them. And if that doesn't sufficiently get them to back down or shut up, she then threatens to sue. For example, journalist Emily Liebert of The Cut reached out to Raichik for a request for comment about an article that she's writing about Nex. And this is what Raichik did. She tagged her and accused her of doing a hit piece, all because she's reaching out for a request for comment. Beyond the pale. But I mean, if she didn't feel responsible in any way whatsoever, why wouldn't she respond? Why not defend herself and answer the questions of these journalists? Why not, at a minimum, offer condolences to Nex's family to show that you're not a complete monster? Well, it's because Chaya Raichik is a monster. She's an immoral person who's opportunistic, who doesn't care about the people that she hurts. But I want to take a moment to talk specifically about Next because they seemed like a really great kid. And it's so sad that we no longer have them in this world. The Independent reports that they were a straight A student with a cat named Zeus, and they were really into video games, specifically Ark and Minecraft. And their life was made a living hell all because of who they were, because they were non-binary. The school failed them. Politicians in their state failed them, and other queer, trans, and non-binary students probably see stories like this and feel hopeless, and I understand why you feel this way. But there's a really important message that I want to share with you from the TikToker who Raichik is threatening to sue, and I'm going to leave you with what she has to say because what she says now is really important.
And if you're a kid out there right now who identifies as non-binary and you're seeing this kind of stuff and it's making you feel very hopeless, just know that there are people out here who are fighting for you, who are fighting to make sure that this never happens again. You will get to grow up, you will get to be who you want to be, and we will not let them take that away from you. So stay with me.